that doesn't count. You actually have to pull yourself with your arms and not use your legs. So I can do it this way.
Did you get some bands to assist you?
No, I didn't. I just kept working at it, and now I have to jump less. Like I used to have to jump all the way up, and now I just kind of a little bit of a boost.
All right, good deal. Good. All right, so in case people that are just watching the show for the first time and seeing Allie is an epidemiologist. She's a mother. She's a fantastic person. She's a lumberjack. What else do you call yourself? Lumberjack? What is it?
Backyard lumberjack, and obviously now working on pull-ups because of you.
Yeah, sure. That's good. That's excellent. Very good. Very good. How was the vacation with the family?
It was great. Thank you. We did a lot of outdoor work. I found that the teenage boys are really quite good at edging lawns and, using like a spade to dig down deep and create a nice edge. So teenage boys came out and they thought it was very funny that I didn't have enough weight to edge the lawn. And so I didn't ask them to actually do work. They got, I think, incentivized to do some work because it was going to embarrass me. So I found that was a very helpful technique. Yeah, and
also edging. That's a nice looking lawn when you edge the lawn. Oh, that looks nice.
It's coming. It's nowhere near looking good. But.
So, are you pretty good, like with the fertilizer and everything, getting rid of the dandelions and all that stuff?
Not at all. I really don't have a green thumb at all. So I feel kind of badly even admitting that. But anything that comes in the house, kind of my husband has to take care of, and he went and got fish, and so I'm afraid to even touch the fish. So like I can shovel things and I can chop wood and I can shovel gravel all day long and I can pick up pine cones all day long, but actually keeping things alive.
Right. The lawn isn't too bad. Once you start to figure it out though, like the lawn isn't that bad. It's like getting the fertilizer at the right time. You go on Scott's, for example, you can go on their website and they'll guide you through like what fertilizer to put down. Like at the start of the season, you want to put down something that kills the weeds and keeps the dandelions down and all that kind of stuff. So, and waters the key. Yeah, here's something learning from a farm boy. If you want to grow grass well, so a lot of people sometimes they'll water their lawn during the middle of the day when the sun's out. You should always water your lawn. Right, water the lawn when it's dark. So what happens is, my father taught me this. When he watered the lawn, he would water it for hours. But he didn't do it that often. But soak the water. So what happens is the roots for the grass are always looking for water. So if the water is just near the top of the surface, the roots now start coming up towards the surface looking for the water. So now when it gets hot and everything like that, your grass is going to die because the roots are right at the surface. If you water, soak the thing, and now the roots have to go down into the ground to get the water. Now they're stronger down there, and that ground will stay more moist and won't get burnt like as dry as the ground at the top. So water is
Yeah, that's why I like talking to you, because you're a fellow farm person.
Yes,
I kind of feel like it's survival of the fittest around my house. Like, I don't want to cater to you a lot, fertilizers and all this and that, like maybe a few chickens would be great, some chicken manure, but those are not legal here.
They're not? No chickens?
No, unfortunately. I think I'm 100 meters from where it's legal. So I'm trying to kind of figure out, like, if they're in my garage, is that legal? Or
here's the other thing. Don't bag with your lawnmower. If you cut the lawn, leave the clipping.
I agree with you.
Yes. Yeah. That's natural fertilizer. It's natural fertilizer. Yeah.
Right. Yes. I just found that we actually got a lawnmower. We got colorful tools for the boys, which I find also encourages them to use them. Nice. So we got a lawnmower, and you know what's funny, Tom? This is totally not going to impress your listeners at all, but it's just, I thought it was funny. So we're in Home Depot and we're looking at lawnmowers, and I saw self-propelled, and I thought, well, that's really great. That's what I want, is self-propelled. You know what I thought self-propelled meant? I thought it meant me myself propels it. I didn't realize it was the lawnmower.
I can see how you get that wrong, no?
Yeah, but the self-propelled was more expensive, which would be contrary to what I would want. Yeah, so I'm like, well, actually, no, I don't want that at all. I want the one that I have to push.
Absolutely. You want the exercise, no question, yeah. Right. You only do it once a week. You're doing it once a week, takes a couple hours, yeah. Did you get a weed whacker too?
We got a weed whacker. We got a chainsaw so that I can, because the wood that I go out and I harvest wood from wherever the city cuts things down. Or if a friend says, hey, I have some wood, would you like it? I know you like to split wood. I say yes, but rarely is it actually the right length. So you can have I'm good with 12, 18 inch. It doesn't matter. I'm not fussy. But if you have like a 27 inch or 30 inch tall thing, it's really hard to split because it's wobbly. Yeah. So you kind of need to knock it back a little bit, and rarely do I inherit wood in my scavenging that's the right length.
Right, totally.
So Chainsaw. So
did
happy.
you get a battery powered chainsaw or the gas?
We did.
Oh,
we got all those colorful Ryobi tools.
Have you used the chainsaw?
Not yet. I plan to.
Promise you something. You got to be careful
with it chainsaw. Jumping, right?
Well, yeah, and you just like really make sure the piece of wood that you're sawing in half, make sure it's in a stable place so it's not rolling around or flipping around, something like that.
Right.
And if for whatever reason, if it jams, don't try to force it. Like turn it off before you. It's not as bad with the battery powered one. The gas one, it's not as bad, but still, you get stuck in your. It's going to leave a mark if you get stuck in your leg.
Right. I was actually worried about when I started to teach myself how to split wood with an axe. I was kind of worried about taking my own leg out because I'm really not coordinated at all. So I trained myself by flipping it over. I might have told you this, and using the blunt end of the maul on a grenade until I got the muscle memory. So I'll do the same with the chainsaw. Really make sure that I stand on it.
You're axing a grenade. Is that what you said?
Well, not a real grenade. They call that like the bulb that you stick in. Yes.
You said grenade. I was like, blow the place up. So have you got a big maul like that's got the wide?
Do. Okay, I have two of them actually. I have one for a guest if you ever come down here.
Oh, I love to. I love chopping wood. Now the best time to chop wood is when it's cold too, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Nice. Well, right. Because obviously then you can build a fire. But yeah, I know that you're thinking that the water freezing inside likes to.
Yeah, the wood, nice. Oh, you know your stuff.
Yeah. So we can do a show when you come down. We'll do a whole wood splitting show.
Yes, live. I like that. I like that a lot. I do watch on YouTube. I watch a lot of shows with these guys. They call it bushcrafting. They'll go out in the woods and they'll build themselves a fort from they bring an axe and stuff, and they'll build a fort and sleep on it a little bit. It's quite the guys are pretty good at it. It's good stuff.
That's cool. We did that actually for a birthday party for one of my boys when he turned 10. There was some really neat couple in Washington State. And I think it's like Wolf Camp, I think is their name. And they do all kinds of outdoor experiential learning. And one of it was just land navigation. And so I said, hey, will you come over? They were like 40 minutes away from us. Will you come over? I'm going to invite 10 boys. And can we do some birthday party orienteering and how to build a shelter? Because we had woods around our house and they were so much fun. They were really wonderful.
I like that. That's good. All right. We had a topic we want to talk about today. We're going to talk about youth sports. Your youth hockey in particular you want to talk about?
Yeah, and just kind of youth sports in general. I know you and I are both very much into fitness and very much into being outside and taking care of yourselves and things like that. And in the news lately, there's been a great amount of attention on Michigan. I don't know if you've been following the surge in cases in Michigan. Oh. And there's also some discussion there. The media is kind of tying it to youth sports, and it's actually not just the media. I think that there are some preliminary sort of like cursory sort of epidemiological reviews that are seeming to link youth sports organizations to cases. And I just wanted to throw out there, maybe some nuance because. And
I'm sorry, Allie, cases of the COVID?
Right. Yeah. The only thing that we talk about these days, right, regarding cases.
Yeah.
So I guess I should caveat that by saying eventually sometime we will stop counting cases and we'll really just be looking at serious disease and hospitalizations and things like that, because we never counted, in the public domain anyway, we never counted flu. And I think that the vaccines are opening the door to moving back in that direction where we can kind of reframe our consciousness about counting cases of any particular pathogen. But for right now, we're still counting cases, and they're tying cases to youth sports organizations. And I think some of that is fair and some of it may not be. And, being a hockey mom and also an epidemiologist and someone who cares deeply about the community, about preventing infection among really vulnerable people, I really think that it's important for anyone running a youth sports organization to be conscious of the tendency to link clusters of cases to the organization, whether or not the cases are actually coming from the field of play. And there's very thin evidence that sports interactions actually cause cases of COVID to arise. The studies that I have actually seen are really not conclusive in that regard. And so I would say the evidence is...
Who's making the claims then that it's tied to the sports?
It's largely in the media, but I can't solely blame the media. They're getting their information from people that they interview, right? I mean, so they're either talking to public health officials in the area. There may be a few epidemiologists who are interested in, quickly ascertaining some blame for transmission. maybe a little bit prematurely, or maybe there is some evidence in some areas that the protocols were not strict enough and there was transmission. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that it's not as likely to happen on the field of play, especially if it's an outdoor sport, as some of these reports might be saying. So,
but you look at professional sports, like we'll take hockey, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not happening there. I mean, there was a team, Vancouver, got in trouble. They had like over 20 players were tested positive, but that was more because one player broke the protocols and went to a restaurant or something. I think that's how it happened. But the rest of the teams, I mean, like they're not being quarantined. They're going home to their families and everything like that, and they don't seem to have any problem. I mean, there have been positive cases, but it doesn't seem like you're saying it's not happening when they're playing against each other. It seems like
right. I mean, the thing is, like, COVID is in the community, right? And so when we were running our we wrote a paper on this. We wrote a paper on our protocols, myself and hockey director and head coach. And I found another wonderful researcher and epidemiologist, actually a PhD. Remember, I'm just master's prepared. I'm just kind of boots on the ground, living in the real world epidemiologist. I'm not a PhD. But we wrote a paper. You are a
PhD in my eyes, sorry.
I've in the School of Life, epidemiology. So and very careful observations over 600 hours of games and practice on our ice and watching our teams, watching the breath coming out of the players. And just like I was like a dog with a bone the entire hockey season, watching carefully what happened. And I just really think that we're too quick to blame groups that can be easily defined by it's this soccer team or it's this whatever team. It's just so convenient, but really we don't do anyone a service by taking the easy way out and saying it's this team, because actually what could be happening is, like you said in Vancouver, I actually read that media report. I think that they actually reserved a restaurant and they really weren't breaking protocols. They were breaking NHL protocols insofar as they were going to indoor dining, but I think that it was okay in Vancouver at the time, if I recall correctly. Yeah. And it was a whole team. And so obviously they were already cohorted together. And so they didn't see any additional risk. But it's possible, that somebody was, pre-infectious and now they're in a enclosed environment with less ideal ventilation, whatever. But it could have easily has happened in the locker room. I don't really know what the NHL was doing with locker rooms, but, from my experience.
Just in general, then, like if you look at places like Florida and Texas, where it appears from media reports that they're like Major League Baseball in Texas, I think they've left the stadiums wide open now. And the numbers appear to be dropping in those states, right? They've gone down, they're lower in that states. So is that more because it's warmer there and they're outside more in the fresh air? Is that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that more. Florida, I was just listening to Governor DeSantis having another forum with a group of epidemiologists who are really opposed to lockdowns and really concerned about the collateral damage about lockdowns and the evidence against, widespread use of masks and things like that. So for your listeners to know that not every public health expert is in full agreement with everything that they're hearing about and that everything's being done in the states. Like there's actually a range of opinions among the experts, and some of the experts are not able to speak as freely as others. There are junior scientists and others who feel like, and I have actually felt this way, I have not actually said everything I really think in any public domain because I'm worried about losing clients or losing credibility. So really what I did is I focused during the entire hockey season on doing the very best that I could, reviewing every scrap of research and evidence that I could at the time, and trying to advise regarding protocols that were feasible, logistically possible, that respected the practicalities of bringing kids to a rink, and that respected the practicalities of masks going on and off and interactions between coaches and parents, and the fact that parents want to watch their kids play, but yet how do we reduce congestion in the building? So the experience that our team had during the hockey season really tried to balance both the science and the practicalities, which is what any good policy does. It looks at the science and it says, okay, but in the real world, how do we make all this work? And I just really, for getting back to the main point of youth sports, it's, if you're running an outdoor sports organization, recognize that you're already in a lower risk environment, and that's great. But do be mindful that as soon as you start bringing kids inside for like an after practice sort of, let's go out for smoothies and all gather in an indoor area, no masks, then you are inviting any potential transmission among adults to happen there if adults are inside. And it could be linked back to your sports organization, even though it had nothing to do whatsoever with the fact that the kids are on the field playing soccer. And so just bear in mind that adults are more likely to be symptomatic. Adults are more likely to transmit the virus back and forth. Yes, we're concerned about transmission among kids. Yes, we want to keep the kids safe. They can't get the vaccine yet. Some of the kids are going to get long COVID. Yes, these are all concerns, but I feel like it's important for people who are in charge of these youth sports organizations to be really mindful of the protocols that they're putting in place, because they're not only protecting the opportunity for kids to play sports, which is important when they're not able to go back to school, some of them right now, but it's also protecting the parents at home. Because when you mix cohorts of kids, you're also bringing their family exposures together, and then the kids bring that back home potentially.
Right. Well, you're saying that youth sports is being blamed for positive tests.
Yeah.
But it may not necessarily be on the playing field. It's when they go to a restaurant or something together, or they're in the locker room, they're not masked up. That's more the issue. You just don't blame it on the sport.
Right. And so like if you are bringing kids inside before they go out for a soccer game, do you really need to bring them inside for, a team meeting and video review? Is there any other way to do that? Should you keep the adults masked at all times, because the adults are more likely to be symptomatic, more likely we adults, we have bigger lungs, and just in talking, we aerosolize more. It can be spread through talking. Yes. So, like I mentioned to you 2 weeks ago when we were talking about small gatherings and how to make them safer, and I said open windows. I mean, that's such a simple thing, but just also be mindful of all of those times when you're gathering people together, even if it's like a picture night and it seems totally innocent. Yeah. You've got like COVID. If you're in a community where COVID's all around, which we had to operate in all year, we were actually, Virginia Beach was actually fairly high incidence during the peak surge. And it looked like our protocols were pretty good at keeping COVID outside the rink, which is all that we could really do, because people are entitled to going about their lives and assuming risks according to different risk thresholds, right? Based on their family, health conditions and, just beliefs, frankly, some of them. So you have to be mindful that each family is going to have a different perspective potentially. But when you bring kids together in the interest of kids having an opportunity to play sports, you have to just be mindful that you're bringing together a lot of variables. And so you want to make sure that you don't leave any places for virus transmission to more easily happen, because it's inadvertently going to be assigned to you. It's going to be blamed on the youth sport when maybe it really wasn't.
Right. And just to be clear too, you see people walking around with a mask on, but they have their nose exposed. It's pointless, correct?
Not pointless, I wouldn't say, because if you think about when I'm talking right now, I'm aerosolizing a lot more out of my mouth than my nose. Is it perfect? No. But is it a step in the right direction? Sure. I mean, there's lots of bad fitting masks out there. And I think part of the reason that I got COVID myself is I specifically chose a mask that was not great. And I knew that. And I knew that before I went to the hockey tournament. And I knew that going to the hockey tournament was potentially a risky thing to do in the fall. As cases were on the rise. And I chose to do it, taking all of those risks into account, because I wanted to live life. And, it happened.
And so you had, 600 hours, you said, of hockey between practice and games? And how many positive cases did you have?
Well, let's wait for the paper to come out and go through peer review, because I don't want to, step out in front of that research. But I will say that we did not find evidence of, there certainly was community transmission. And we certainly did hear about cases among our organization, but we did not find evidence of on ice transmission between the kids.
Interesting.
And this is not necessarily new finding. There's some research among players, rugby players, that seems to show show the same thing, but that's outside. And so one of the unique things about our effort to really carefully craft protocols that were doable and feasible for a season, we didn't actually have to modify them. We just kind of kept them in place, is it's an indoor sport on a smaller than standard rink. And we're hopeful that maybe, if our paper goes through peer review and it's accepted for publication, it might be able to point the way toward other organizations being able to do something similar to make it possible for, kids to be able to continue playing sports, and yet families who are super concerned about bringing the virus home to have some confidence in the fact that it's not happening within the confines of the sport itself.
Yeah, that's very cool. How many other people do you think are doing something like that?
I think we talked to I use Twitter very carefully to find people who are doing interesting research and also very committed to their communities and to youth sports. And so we talked to a Farm D in Detroit, actually, who also plays hockey. He's a hockey dad, a hockey coach, hockey player himself. And we're just, starting to like reach out and see what other places around the country are doing and see if we can learn from them and see if there's anything that we did that we can offer to them. But I think there's great opportunity for very simple, no-cost protocols to make youth sports safe, even indoors. So
does this transfer then to going to a grocery store and then not having to, so the kids are playing without a mask, correct?
They were, yep.
So does that transfer then if you're going to a grocery store or a restaurant and say, well, you don't necessarily have to wear a mask then?
You always ask good questions, Tom. I think that sitting in a restaurant is different than playing hockey. Now, you're a hockey player, right? And USA Hockey put body monitors on people and looked at the length of interactions on the ice. And they found that they were extremely short. I mean, when you check somebody, Tom, right? How close are you? I mean, like you might be given a bear hug.
Yeah. For 1 second, you're not hugging that. Yeah.
No, 5 seconds, right? And you would know this better than me. When you're actually playing hockey, you are breathing really, really hard. But I know when I've been in extreme exertion situations, it's almost like I'm not really exhaling all that much until I'm done with that exertional period. And then on the bench, I'm exhaling a lot. Is that true?
Right. Yeah, that
it
probably
seems
does make
interesting to me.
Yeah, that does make more sense. Yeah, because your heart rate. So that's a good point. So then you go back to the bench; they're not wearing masks then, but now they're exhaling much more sitting on the bench, right beside each other on the bench too, right?
I think so. And but if you watch the coaches are the ones that are yelling a lot. The players are recovering and they're not actually talking all that much. From what I saw with our kids,
and
they're
the
just kind of
like
like
the coaches are wearing masks, right? The coaches are wearing masks.
Yep, because coaches can't help but yell. They get really excited. Same with the fans. I mean, you get like super excited and you're aerosolizing a lot. And the coaches are standing typically, whereas the players are sitting. And so the air is coming out and going right over them and then just sitting there. So I think it's really important that coaches be masked. I'm not sure that taking the plexiglass away from behind the bench, like the NHL did, I'm not sure that did a whole lot. I think the biggest exposures were probably in the locker rooms because they're actually, if you think about like 25 players and whatever square footage that was, it's actually not all that distanced, but they want to be together, I'm sure.
I'm just trying to think of the logic. So when you breathe it out, let's say somebody has the virus, they breathe out, and now the virus is kind of hanging in the air. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
So then
generally,
people are skating around all the time. The wind is constantly moving.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess if you skated through where the virus is, yes, you're gonna get contacted. But if you're skating around, it'll be moving the virus, spreading it out kind of.
Right. Now, so that's one of the big caveats, right? Any study has limitations. And from what I saw when we were first starting the season, I was researching, COVID and ice hockey just to see what I was getting myself into. And it did look like there was the potential that people were kind of thinking, hey, you've got this confined area, you've got boards, and then you have glass, and then it's cold, and then you might have like layers of, I think there was an old Zamboni study that talked about, whether or not it's actually okay for hockey players to play hockey given the exhaust from the Zamboni, and does it sit in one place? And there's a Yale researcher who was looking at, air quality in there and looking at layers. But so, yeah, I do think that there's probably some risk, and it's probably higher indoors than it is out. I mean, that only makes sense. I know you asked originally about the restaurant, but the hockey question is interesting because it's, there is ventilation and there is air quality controls, and you are trying to take care of the ice, but do some of those things cause the virus to be more viable for longer? I don't think we actually really know. I mean, we know that COVID doesn't terribly like heat and humidity, but inside in a hockey rink, you don't really have a lot of heat. It's nice and cool. So is that making it easier? And then you've got people in very high exertional, like for 90 seconds, they're going all out and they're breathing in a lot. Well, they're also breathing out a lot. I don't know. You have kids are pretty low risk of transmitting. Another study just came out that I haven't reviewed fully, but it does look like they have lower viral loads. Their PCR values are lower. So the research is just like over the course of 18 months or so now, it's adding up, and you kind of have to look at where it's moving to cut a trend line through and see what you really believe. But at the beginning of our hockey season, we had to work with what we knew at the time, which is, gosh, it could be a pretty high risk environment. You really cannot let the virus in. And so I think the really key thing there is if you have any symptoms, however mild they are, if you don't think it could possibly be COVID, it may well be. we found people with like a runny nose and ended up being COVID, right? And so, the virus affects everybody differently. So I think that the wonderful thing that our community did is they just really held the line on symptoms. They did not come to the rink if they had symptoms.
But what if you're always going to have some people though that either just say, I'm just not going to tell anybody. I just got a fever. I'm not going to tell anybody because I want to play the game, right?
Right.
But let me go back to something you mentioned there before. So the virus does not like heat, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're playing the game to your body heat, your body temperature increases, right? Could it be that even the virus comes into your body, but because it doesn't like the heat and your body temperature is risen?
Well, that's one of the natural defenses you have, right, is fever. And that's why actually, I might have said this on your show a long time ago, but when I actually had COVID, I tried not to take anything at all, even though my temperature was kind of going up towards 100 and I was uncomfortable. I really think that it's a good idea to try not to medicate away a fever unless you are really, really high or you've been advised to do so. Remember, I'm not a medical professional, so this is just working on basic biology. But the idea with raising your body temperature is it causes proteins to fall apart. And so I think, anything that you can throw at your advantage versus the virus is a good thing. And so I don't know if you actually raise your core temperature enough as an athlete to make it more difficult, because you're breathing in cool air. And so your respiratory passages are actually fairly cool, no matter how hot you are. So I don't know. But to your point about people, just not wanting to test or not admitting that they feel a little off or whatever. Yeah, that's going to happen. And that will happen out of, purely goodwill and not having any idea that it could possibly be COVID, or it could be, I don't think it's a risk. I'm not really buying into this. It's such a big deal. I'm just going to go because, nothing's going to come of it. And so you have to have protocols that work 95% of the time. And you're going to have some 5% of people who just, are, like I said, like there's no harm, no fault, no blame here. It's just, there's going to be breaches, right? And so your protocols have to be able to accommodate that. And we did find that they seem to work, even with that happening occasionally.
So not just limited to your tests that you're doing. There's going to be lots of tests that are done. The government's going to do tests. Doctors doing tests. Can it potentially get to the point where they just ultimately can't have all the answers, or even more answers than you want? This would just be something to say, this, we just don't know. Like, do women get it more than men? I read a story the other day. I thought it said that maybe women were getting it more, or there's more adverse reactions to the vaccines, all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So yes, like just in science in general, we may say, well, we don't know the answers to all this.
Right. Stuff. We were talking about that before the show a little bit, because I think people get really frustrated. They want the experts to have the answers, and yet they don't want the experts to be able to change their minds. And yet we also want them to have some fidelity to the science, that follow the science thing, which I actually really kind of hate. So we have to leave room for people to say, you know what, this is what I know today. Tomorrow I may change my mind. And then when they actually do change their mind and they come forward and they change their mind, we have to say, okay, thank you for telling me, instead of, oh, you changed your mind, now we're so mad. We have to leave room for that if we want the truth. Right.
I just think there's such a lack of trust from the public, the general public, towards the politicians and everything. And we talked about Fauci before, getting kind of drawn into that. He's not a politician, but and like you said, he has changed his mind. Everybody said, oh, you can't trust him. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Because now he changed his mind. And I think that's just a byproduct of to me, it's more of a byproduct of the political environment where we just don't trust politicians. So anybody that's tied to that whole regime, it's like, you don't trust them. I know, it's too bad.
Right. It's really hard. I think the pandemic is really a good thing insofar as we have encouraged a public discourse about science, which I think is phenomenal. I mean, I think it's really wonderful to get people engaged and interested in the process of discovery and critical thinking. I think that is fantastic.
Well, and like
not prepared with that.
But like you've said so far too, and you're great at this, and you've taught me this. This is where I've learned stuff from you. I can do my own research. I just don't have to watch the news to find things out. There's so many places I can go to find out the information, right?
Right. And leave yourself room to be, make the best decision you can today and then change your mind. I think sometimes we paint ourselves into corners because, on Twitter or somewhere else, we've said, come out very strong with some opinion that maybe we wrote too late at night. And then the next day you want to reverse course and you can't because you've already painted yourself into a corner. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to be mindful of what we say in public areas and be willing to be wrong, be willing to go look for more information, come back to topics and say, hey, what do you think about this? I just saw this thing. and just see it as a continuing opportunity for learning. Like you said, you've really enjoyed the process of learning. Yeah. And I think that there are, and you also mentioned the word trust, which I think I've come back to many times in our conversations, because I think that part of learning who you can trust is, who do you see is willing to be wrong? And if you see someone who's willing to be wrong or change their mind, and they're consistently revisiting questions, then maybe they have an opportunity to earn your trust. Maybe they are very factual, right?
That's an interesting point. So what I see now happening, again, we're talking about politics. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong on this, it seems that politicians don't want to change their mind, right? Once they make a stand on something, they feel like they have to continue on with that stand. Somehow they lose credibility if they now change things. But I guess, isn't it kind of the presentation too? Like, they've said something. I'll think back to President Obama. If you don't like your health care, if you don't like, or you can keep your health care system. I can't remember how the whole Obamacare thing, he got stuck in a thing there where it said, it ended up being very open that he was not right. And he seemed like he wouldn't change. And I'm using him for an example. And there's all the politicians are doing this.
Right.
It's like, I just feel like it takes a stronger person to say, listen, this is what I thought at the time were the facts. I have now been presented with new facts. And now I clearly was not accurate in what I said before. I think I don't know. For me, it's like, okay, how you present it. I would think that's a stronger person and you explain it. Like, just don't, like, it's not like you're giving in, like, so, oh God, everybody else is telling me that I need to change my mind. It's more like, explain the reason why you said what you said before. And this is what I'm saying now, right?
Yeah. And, not all facts are created the same. Like, just because a study is published doesn't necessarily make it a good study. Like, I was looking at one really, really critically before you and I started talking. There's something called confirmation bias, where people look for information that justifies the opinion that they have. And so they might only bring out the things that say further substantiate their position. And all of us have to be careful of that.
Yeah.
And so, even when I'm thinking about which podcast I'm going to listen to, I ask myself, hey, are you listening to people that you're not likely to agree with as well as people you might agree with? Or, there's even people who are way over on one side, toward a side that I might tend to agree with, but actually they're so radicalized on that side that I think they could offer a little bit more nuance and come back toward the middle. So I tend to live in the gray area where, there's room for doubt, there's room for change, there's room for additional information to come in, and I'm okay there. But a lot of people are not really okay in the gray zone because it's uncomfortable. They would rather get into it.
I call it thoroughly blissful ignorance.
So or you really want some assurance, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to say I don't know. Convince me. Like, I don't have a stance one way or the other. Convince me what the truth is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And even that makes me uncomfortable, because, like, to convince someone of the truth, like, because I think that needs to be situated in your particular context and your world, like who you are, like just your whole vaccine question.
Yeah, you're probably right. I shouldn't say convince me the truth. Tell me what you think about this position, right? Like, tell me your position. Right. Yeah.
And when I do tell it, ask somebody, so what are the limitations? What are your doubts? What are your questions? And if they have no questions, you're like, that's interesting, because you really should have some unanswered questions.
Oh, totally, yeah.
That's also the nature of science.
I'm bad, but if I'm in a business deal too, and somebody presents me with something, I try to warn them in advance now and say, listen, I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm going to try to poke the holes in your concept here. Right? I think it's important to try to poke the hole in the concept. And some people get aggravated when I do it, but I try to warn them that I'm doing it, because I think you have to, right? I mean, because when somebody makes a presentation of something that they're very passionate about, and they want to convince you of what, like, so some guy comes to me with a business deal, he wants to try to convince me this is the best business deal ever. I get it totally, and I'm happy that he is so passionate about his deal. But is he always looking at all the other things that could go wrong? So you got to ask, what do you worry about here? What could go wrong? And so
I think that's a smart way to be. And, for me, it's kind of something similar to that, is I live my life thinking about the denominator, which might be really odd and super nerdy. But I realize, like, when I think about different things, I'm like, so which population did they actually study? Right? So if you didn't even make it into the denominator in the first place, you'll never make it into the numerator. And so that entire fraction, I think, that entire fraction is so important.
You're a nerd. You are a nerd. Yeah. Totally.
But that denominator is so important, and has been so important from the beginning of the pandemic. It's how it is the foundation for everything.
What do you, I know what a denominator is in terms of math. What are you saying? What's the denominator?
That's exactly that. So a fraction, numerator and denominator. Did you eat half your pizza, right? so the denominator, though, from an epidemiological sense, is what study population did I grab? Who is in my sample? Is it all 18-year-olds and up? Or is it only 12 to 15-year-olds? Is it only healthy people? Is it only people who had a BMI less than 30? Like, who's in there? Who gets into the bottom of the fraction is so important.
I never thought of it that way. That was good. That was really nerdy, but really good.
Yeah.
The way you said that was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I love this stuff. We talked about before the show. Like, one of the biggest things I've learned is learning to learn. Like, it's amazing during this pandemic and I open my eyes up and I go like, why wasn't I doing this before? Like, it's one of those things. And that's another story altogether. I don't think people should beat themselves up because I think we look at our past and maybe you did something or you should have done something. You think to yourself, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do that? But it's just part of growing up, right? It's part of experience.
Today's a new day, like seriously, I don't really keep a ledger. I try to cut myself some slack. And so and I know you do this too. And you're like today is a new day, 3:55 a.m. It's a new day, right, Tom?
Absolutely. Yep.
Today you were going to be dangerous. So what does that mean? You learning about denominators?
I have just learned that this is how I feel. I got this morning. I just felt dangerous. That's just the word that came to me. I felt dangerous.
Was the word?
When I started saying to myself too, I was like, "Yeah, I'm dangerous today." Like, yeah.
Do you want to know the Japanese for that?
What's that?
Abunai.
Abunai. Oh, that's good. I like that. Abunai.
Oh,
that's good. Good one to use in the gym. I like that. Abunai. Funny stuff. It's like even in the gym lately, I'm always trying to tell people you're trying to get better all the time. Always trying. So if you're doing something, don't try to make it easier on yourself. Always try to increase the degree of difficulty. So I do a lot of my exercises on a Bosu ball. And so now I've taken 2 Bosu balls. So I've got one foot on one Bosu ball, one on the other. I saw that. And so it's pretty good. But the problem is now, like, it just rips up your core. Like, when you're doing an exercise, you have to focus so much. There are some days you go into the gym and you're like, oh man, I'm really pushing now, because now you can't back up. I mean, I can't just stand on the floor. I've got to do the Bosu ball. So it's
yeah. Well, it's unfortunate because I think I read when you hit 40 and up, you actually begin losing muscle mass each year. So it's not like you're actually working to maintain, which is, and I can feel that.
Don't. We do not give into that stuff. I hear the science when people say that, but I just don't believe that. I think you can fight through that. I think you just improve. Like, you got to have a better diet. You have to work smarter.
I agree with you.
It's the same thing with sleep. Now, I know the studies say we need our 8 hours of sleep, and I get it. So I'm not trying to say to somebody you shouldn't get the 8 hours. I just believe that if I get less, and even if I'm tired, like especially in the morning, if I know I've gotten less sleep and that the science is telling me I'm supposed to be tired mentally, tired physically, that's when I have my best workout, because I just feel like now I have to push even harder, right? I have to go to a better level. If I've had enough sleep, I kind of I've had a good enough sleep, so I'm ready to go. Like, I just feel the opposite way. I just think and this is just in general, a lot of us get caught in these traps where we say, well, it's pump day, or excuse me, it's hump day. Like, I'm just trying to get through the week. Well, I want it to be pump day. Like, I'm powering through the week. Or then people go, oh, it's Monday, or it's cold or whatever. Well,
right.
Like, my biggest thing, you watch the weather now, and when it gets cold, they call it a polar vortex. Well, we never called it a polar.
You still had to get up and take care of the cows, right?
Yeah, it's cold. And, they give it a name. I think when you give it a name, it's like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be cold because this is a polar vortex. I think it's just
my girlfriend and I would go running in Japan. Like, Japan has some intense rains, and my girlfriend and I, we would get up at 5:20. I still run with her at 5:20. Only it's 4:20 in the afternoon my time. It's 5:20 a.m. her time. So we still run together. We still talk. But in Japan, we'd be the only ones out running, and we felt so good. We were like, we are insane because we're going to be drenched to the bone. Yeah. But we still go out. We took selfies of ourselves just utterly drenched.
But here's the key. I'm glad you brought that up. But you know what? We take a shower. We purposely, I know we don't have our clothes on, but we get in the shower and purposely get wet. So what's the difference? You get wet. It's wet.
Yeah, you're uncomfortable for a little bit, but it makes me laugh. Those are the runs I remember, not the great ones that are, 70 degrees and super. I remember some of those, but I literally remember the terrible ones.
Isn't that true though? Because it's one of those things, you can't run in the rain. It's raining. Why not? It's water, for God's sakes,
Or they say you get sick because you're out in the rain, but I believe that I looked into that one time, and they actually did a challenge study, which means you take healthy people and you shoot virus up their nose. And I believe that I read this, not too long ago, and they actually did a challenge study to see if that was true. And they gave some like low dose of, I don't remember exactly what, some cold virus to people. And they had them run and just to see if there was any difference in symptoms and infection.
Right.
Obviously they were infected because they sprayed the virus in their nose, but like symptomatic. And there really wasn't. So I remember thinking, that debunked that myth. So I guess I have no real excuse now because it doesn't look like it's really an issue.
Yeah. It's the same thing with the cold. I think I'm bad. I'm not suggesting people should do this, but like I like to drive down the highway and it's like 30 degrees, 25 degrees with the windows open to see how long I can take it. Like my left ear, the wind's coming in, it's like getting frozen, it's going to fall off or something like that. But I do think like people say, well, you're going to get a cold if you're in the cold. I don't think that's true, right? And getting a cold is a virus, correct? It
is. So like wherein the truth lies is remember we talked a little bit 2 weeks ago about immunosuppression. You asked me what causes immunosuppression. I said I couldn't answer that because there were too many things. Well, I tried to get an answer for you before this show, and there's still too many things that cause it. It's caused by conditions, chronic conditions. It's caused intentionally by drugs to fight cancer and things like that. So it's just really too complicated to go into. But rest assured, there's many, many ways to become immunocompromised or immunosuppressed for a long time or a short time. But there is some possible suggestion that if you were to put your body in a situation where it was having to stay warm and for a long period of time, and maybe you weren't eating properly and things like that, it's possible maybe that would induce some immunosuppression. The interesting thing, though, for your athletes out there listening is following marathons and tremendously difficult endurance events, you do have a bit of a dip in your immune capacity. And so it's not terribly uncommon to get a cold after running a marathon.
Oh, okay.
So I've run 5 and I can't say that I remember getting a cold afterwards, but I did take care of myself and hydrate extra well and, maybe take some zinc and vitamin C and things like that, just being aware of that. But
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, ma'am. And I do call you a nerd. It's a friendly nerd. Okay. You're my friends.
It's a high compliment.
Yeah, it's compliment. Yeah, definitely. Yes.
I did want to say one thing from the business world. You mentioned business and people making decisions and you like being the natural skeptic that you are and asking questions. With regard to business decisions and things, I remember Jeff Bezos saying once that one of his business secrets was making a decision one day based on the best information possible, but he always left himself room for the next day to change his mind. And if one of the richest guys in the world operates his life that way, I think that that's a fair, a fair way to carve out some room for us to gain more knowledge and more intelligence every day, and even be willing to revise our opinions if we were, forming steadfast opinions based on something. Sometimes we form opinions because we want to take a different course than someone else. Like sometimes, right? Like I remember being a kid and just being a bit rebellious and not wanting to do something simply because everyone else was.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if we can be slightly introspective and look at how we're choosing to go about our lives and making choices, just give yourself room to consider whether or not that's a motivating factor, just not wanting to be a bandwagon jumper, because I am not. I don't follow crowds. But if that's your only reason not to do something, then give yourself room to revise the next day.
Yeah, don't be different just to be different. If you want to be different because you think there's a better path by being different, then absolutely do it. And I think ego gets in the way. And I can certainly speak to this myself. Ego, sometimes you've taken the stand and you don't want to back away from the stand, even though you're wrong. Right?
Grasshoppers are nimble, right? Grasshoppers can jump any which way. You have no idea which direction they're going to go.
But they just never quit. They keep going. Hundreds of millions of years. Grasshoppers. All right. Great to see you again, Allie. I know we're fine now. I was a little bit down for suffering some, I felt terrible for a week. Let's just put it that way, because you weren't there last week. We're better now.
Thank you for being patient.
Yes, we've had our dose of Allie. All right, everybody. Thanks again, Allie. Can you give us your contact information? Anybody wants to get a hold of you and your company name and everything again one more time?
Sure. It's ABC Medical Writing for Artemis Biomedical Communications, abcmedicalwriting.com.
Excellent. And they get a hold of you on your website. Oh, good job. Yep. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.